The candles were already lit when she felt it. Not saw it. Not heard it. Felt it. The way you feel a shift in weather before the sky changes color. The way your body registers something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. Zara Ellison was standing in the middle of the most beautiful room she had ever walked into in her life, surrounded by every person who had ever meant anything to her. Champagne fizzing softly in the glass she was holding, laughter rising and falling around her like music, and then something changed. The air shifted. She couldn't explain it. One moment she was laughing at something her best friend Camille had whispered in her ear, and the next moment the laughter died quietly in her throat and her eyes moved, without her permission, without any conscious decision, across the room, and found him. Brennan Cole was standing near the far wall, one hand in his pocket, dressed in a dark suit that fit him the way expensive things fit men who don't need them to. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was completely, utterly still in a room full of movement, and he was looking at her. Not the way your boyfriend looks at you across a party. Not even the way a man who loves you looks at you. The way a man looks at a woman when he has already made a decision. Completely, irrevocably, with his whole chest, and the whole world is about to find out what it is. Zara's champagne glass stilled in her hand. Her breath did something she couldn't describe. Not stopped, something more subtle than stopping. It held, like her body had decided on its own, that it needed every bit of oxygen it currently had and wasn't willing to release a single molecule of it until it understood what was happening. Brennan didn't look away. She told herself it was the candlelight. She told herself it was the champagne, the emotion of turning 25, the overwhelm of walking into a room this beautiful and realizing it had all been built for her. She told herself there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for the way her heartbeat had changed rhythm without asking her first. She told herself a lot of things in that single, suspended moment. None of them were true, and somewhere in the deepest, most honest part of her chest, the part that had loved Brennan Cole quietly and then loudly and then completely for the past 2 years, she already knew. She just didn't know she knew yet. Before we go any further, if this story is already doing something to your chest, if you're already leaning in, please take a moment right now to subscribe to this channel, give this video a like, and share it with someone who believes in a love like this. This channel is built on stories like this one, and every single subscribe helps it grow. Now let's go back to the beginning, because to understand this night, you have to understand everything that came before it. Zara Ellison had been taking photographs since she was 14 years old. It started with a disposable camera her mother gave her on a family trip to the Smoky Mountains. Nothing fancy, nothing significant, just a plastic rectangle with a roll of film inside. But Zara had held it up and looked through the tiny viewfinder and felt something click into place inside her that had nothing to do with the shutter. She felt, for the first time, like she was seeing the world the right way. Like the frame gave everything meaning it hadn't had before. By 17 she had a real camera. By 20 she had a portfolio. By 23 she had a name in Charlotte's creative community. Zara Ellison, freelance photographer, the woman you called when you wanted your moment to look like art. She was good at her work in the way that only people who genuinely love something can be. Not just technically, though she was precise, deliberate, gifted with light and angle and timing. But emotionally, she had a way of capturing the feeling inside a moment, not just the surface of it. A bride's exhale before she walked down the aisle. A father's face when he saw his daughter in her dress for the first time. The exact second two people stopped being nervous and remembered why they were there. She was 24 years old and she was extraordinary at freezing other people's love in time. Her own was a different story. Zara had loved before Brennan. She wasn't naive, wasn't untouched. She had given pieces of herself to men who had not been careful with them, and she had learned, slowly, painfully, the way most women learn these things, to be selective about what she offered and to whom. She was warm, deeply warm, but guarded at the center. She let people close but not all the way close. She saved the last room for herself. Until him. Until Brennan. She met him on a Tuesday in October 18 months ago, in the lobby of a building he owned. She'd been hired by a lifestyle magazine to shoot a feature on a newly developed mixed-use property in uptown Charlotte. Modern architecture. Rooftop gardens, floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of building that made you stop on the sidewalk and look up. She arrived early because she was always early, and was standing in the lobby reviewing her shot list when the elevator opened and a man walked out who made every carefully constructed thought in her head go momentarily quiet. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair, slightly disheveled in a way that looked accidental but probably wasn't. A jaw that could have been drawn by someone who took their time. He was on the phone, speaking in a low, even voice, wearing a suit with the jacket thrown over his arm like a man who had already been at work for 4 hours and had 4 more ahead of him. He moved through the lobby with the ease of someone who owned things, not arrogantly, just naturally, the way people move through spaces that belong to them. He was 33. She was 24. He was Brennan Cole, CEO of Cole Development Group, and he was the reason she was here. He ended his call when he saw her, and the transition was smooth, no fumbling, no distraction. He just looked up, looked at her, and walked toward her with his hand extended. "Ms. Ellison," he said, "thank you for being on time." "I'm always on time," she said, and shook his hand. He almost smiled. "Good. Then we'll get along fine." They did. What happened between that Tuesday and today didn't happen the way people fall in movies. Fast and dramatic at the cost of everything else. It happened the way real things happen. Slowly. In the margins. In the spaces between other moments. It started with the shoot. He showed her the building himself. Walked her through every floor, every deliberate design choice, every view he'd fought for in the planning stages. She asked questions. He answered them. She noticed that he spoke about the people who would live there more than the profit margins. She noticed that he noticed things, the way light moved through the glass at certain hours, the way sound carried in the open atrium, details that most CEOs wouldn't bother tracking. She photographed the building and delivered a body of work that made the magazine's editor call her twice. Brennan called her 3 days after the feature published. He said he wanted to commission personal prints of 3 of the shots for his office. She quoted him her rate. He didn't negotiate. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop to discuss the order. The coffee meeting lasted 4 hours. Neither of them talked about photographs for most of it. They talked about Charlotte, about where she'd grown up in the city and where he'd come from. A small town in western North Carolina, not money, not privilege, just a father who worked with his hands and a belief that discipline was the same thing as freedom. They talked about work and what it meant to them. They talked about the Smoky Mountains because she mentioned the camera her mother had given her and he said he'd hiked that trail, and somehow that opened a door they both walked through without discussing whether it was a good idea. She drove home that evening and sat in her car in the parking garage for 10 minutes before going upstairs. She didn't know what to do with what had just happened. She did know she wanted it to happen again. It happened again. And again. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became long evening walks. Long evening walks became the kind of closeness that doesn't have a clean name because it's too warm and too specific and too charged at the edges to be filed under anything ordinary. They texted every day. Not always about anything important, sometimes about nothing at all, but consistently, reliably, the way people do when they are becoming necessary to each other. Camille noticed first. Camille Jenkins had been Zara's best friend since the 7th grade, and she had never once in that time been wrong about a man's intentions. She watched Zara talk about Brennan for 3 weeks before she set her coffee down and said, with the precision of a woman who did not traffic in uncertainty, "Zara, that man is in love with you." "We've known each other for 3 weeks, Zara said. And Camille. He's a CEO. He's 33. He's gorgeous. Obviously interested. Texting you every single day." "Yes, I see the problem." Zara had laughed and changed the subject. But the subject wouldn't stay changed. Because Brennan was present in a way she wasn't used to. He listened when she talked. Not the performative listening of a man waiting for his turn, but actual listening, the kind where he remembered things she'd said weeks later and wove them back into conversation without flagging it. He showed up. If she mentioned she was nervous about a difficult shoot, he'd text her that morning with something brief and steady that always made her shoulders drop half an inch before she finished reading. He asked about her work with genuine curiosity. He asked about her mother, who had passed 3 years earlier, and didn't flinch when the answer was complicated. He was, in the plainest terms, the easiest person she had ever known. And that terrified her. Because the easy ones, she had learned, were the ones who could hurt you in ways the difficult ones never could. The easy ones were the ones you let all the way in before you realized you'd done it. She tried to be careful. She tried to maintain the distance she had always maintained, to keep the last room locked. But Brennan had a particular way of standing in doorways. Patient, unhurried, not pushing, simply present. That made every locked room eventually remember it was allowed to open. He asked her to be his girlfriend on a Thursday evening in April, for months after they met. He took her to a rooftop restaurant she hadn't been to before. Small, quiet, the kind of place with 20 tables and a view of the city that made you feel like you'd climbed above the noise of everything ordinary. They ate dinner and the conversation was what it always was between them, warm, rolling from one thing to the next without seams. And then he set his fork down and looked at her. The air shifted. She felt it before she understood it. That specific quality of attention that meant he was about to say something real. "I want to tell you something," he said. She waited. "I think you already know it. But I want to say it properly, because you deserve that." She didn't speak. "I'm in love with you, Zara." He said it the way he said most things, without theater, without performance, but with a weight behind it that made theater unnecessary. "I've been in love with you since somewhere around the second hour of that first coffee meeting. I want to be with you, not halfway, not casually. I want to be your person. I want to ask if you'll let me." The city glittered behind him. Zara felt her eyes burn and hated it and let it happen anyway. "You're asking me to be your girlfriend," she said. "At 33. I'm 33, not 83. The corner of his mouth lifted. "I believe the concept still applies." She laughed. The laugh broke something open in her chest. Something sealed. Something she had been managing carefully for years. And before she could stop herself, before she could calculate or protect or measure, she said yes. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. That was it. That was the whole moment. But Zara would remember the weight of his hand over hers for the rest of her life. The 18 months that followed were the most quietly extraordinary of her life. Not extraordinary in the way of constant grand gestures and fireworks, though Brennan was, when the occasion called for it, capable of both. Extraordinary in the texture of daily life. In the specific, compounding intimacy of being truly known by another person and not finding it frightening. He came to her gallery showcases and stood in front of her photographs with an attention that made other people stop and look more carefully too, as if his focus were contagious. She traveled with him on work trips, Chicago, Nashville, Atlanta, and while he was in meetings she was out in the city with her camera, and when he was done they would meet somewhere she had found and she would show him what she had seen and he would look at her photographs the way he always looked at her work, like she had done something that genuinely moved him. He cooked on Sunday mornings. She made his coffee without asking. He remembered she preferred the window seat. She learned that he was better in silence than almost anyone she had ever met, that he could sit beside her without filling the space, and that his quiet was never cold, never a withdrawal, just a man comfortable enough not to perform. Camille updated her assessment from "that man is in love with you" to "I will never forgive you if you mess this up," which Zara took as the highest compliment available. Danny, her younger sister, 22 and effortlessly chaotic, had met Brennan at a family dinner in month 3 and immediately declared him the best thing to ever happen to Zara while looking directly at Zara when she said it, so there was no ambiguity about the target. Brennan had taken it in stride. He always did. He was, in every sense of the word she could find, good. Not perfect, he could be too focused, too locked in his own head about work, slow to ask for help when he needed it. But good in the marrow. Good in the parts that mattered. Good in the way that her father had been good. And that was not a comparison she made lightly. She loved him in a way she hadn't known she was capable of. She told him so, approximately 3 months into the relationship, at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, in her kitchen, eating cereal in the dark because neither of them could sleep. He had looked at her. This woman in an oversized t-shirt with a spoon halfway to her mouth and said without hesitation, "I know. I love you the same way." Later she would think that was one of the best moments of her life. She had many of them with him. The week before her 25th birthday something shifted. She couldn't name it at first. Nothing felt wrong, nothing was wrong. Brennan was warm, attentive, present. He brought her coffee on Wednesday morning and sat across from her while she went through her editing queue and they didn't speak for an hour and it was perfect. But he was careful. That was the word that kept rising. He was being careful with her, in a way that was slightly different from his normal care. His eyes lingered a breath too long. When she turned around unexpectedly, she caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't fully read. Something deep and deliberate. Like a man studying something precious, memorizing it, the way you memorize a thing you are afraid you might one day need to recall from memory alone. She asked if he was all right on Thursday evening. Her feet curled beneath her on his couch, his arm around her shoulders, the television on but neither of them watching it. He smiled, slow and private. I'm better than all right. You're being strange. I'm always a little strange. This is a different kind of strange, Brennan. He turned and looked at her. Really looked at her. And for a moment she thought he was going to say something. Something real, something weighted, the kind of sentence that changes the air in a room. His mouth opened slightly. Then he closed it. He reached over and tucked a curl behind her ear. Let his fingers rest at her jaw for just a moment. Trust me, he said quietly. She searched his eyes. Okay, she said. I trust you. He kissed her forehead and pulled her back against his shoulder, and she stayed there, listening to the low, steady sound of his heartbeat, and told herself she was imagining things. She wasn't imagining anything. Camille was useless all week. Every time Zara tried to talk to her, Camille found an exit. A phone call, a forgotten errand, a sudden urgent need to be somewhere else. Danny was worse. Danny laughed at things that weren't funny and left sentences unfinished and seemed to be operating on information Zara didn't have access to. By Friday, Zara had filed it all under birthday excitement and let it go. She was turning 25. People got strange about milestone birthdays. It was allowed to feel big. It was allowed to make the people around her act like they knew something wonderful was coming. She was right about that last part. She just had no idea how right. The night of the party arrived the way significant nights always do. Slightly too fast, with a particular quality of light that makes you feel like you're already inside a memory before it has finished happening. Zara spent the afternoon getting ready at Camille's apartment because that was their tradition. Any significant occasion they got ready together with music and snacks and the specific quality of conversation that only exists between people who have known each other since they were 12. Camille did Zara's hair. Zara did Camille's makeup. They moved around each other in the easy rhythm of long familiarity. At one point, while Zara was sitting in front of the mirror, she caught Camille looking at her in the reflection with an expression so layered, so full, that she turned around. What? Zara said. Camille shook her head slowly. Nothing. You just look beautiful. Camille. Zara. A pause. The kind that breathes. Just enjoy tonight. Every single second of it. Promise me. Something moved through Zara's chest. A prescience she couldn't locate the source of. You're scaring me a little. Don't be. Camille smiled, warm and certain and holding something just beneath the surface. There is nothing to be scared of tonight. I promise you that with my whole heart. Zara held her gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to the mirror. She put on the dress. Deep burgundy, soft fabric, the one Brennan had seen her try on 2 weeks ago in a boutique downtown, and said, very quietly, just that single word, that one. And she looked at herself and thought, I am 25 years old. I am loved. I am ready for whatever tonight is. She had no idea what tonight was. The venue stole her breath. She had walked into beautiful spaces before, had photographed them, had built her career on learning to see them correctly. But this was different because this space had been built for her, designed around the specific knowledge of who she was, what she loved, what made her feel most herself. Warm amber light everywhere, soft and golden. Exactly the kind of light she always chased in her own work. Her favorite flowers, ranunculus and garden roses in blush and ivory, on every surface. A playlist moving through every chapter of her life. Songs that had soundtracked her childhood, her college years, the past 18 months of loving Brennan. She walked through the entrance and stopped. The room turned toward her. Not a shout, more like a wave of warmth. People turning and opening their arms and smiling with the specific joy of people who are genuinely glad to see you. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Her eyes filled immediately. No, Camille said firmly at her shoulder. "We just did your makeup." Zara laughed. A wet, helpless sound, and fanned her face and moved into the room and let it hold her. Hugs from her college friends, from her cousins, from colleagues and neighbors and people from every chapter of her life gathered in one warm, glowing space. And then she found Brennan. He was near the center of the room, speaking with two of his colleagues, but he looked up the moment she walked in, as if some part of him had been tuned to her frequency and registered her arrival before his eyes confirmed it. He excused himself without looking away from her and moved across the room. He stopped in front of her, and there it was again, that look, the one she had seen from across the room the moment she arrived, the one that wasn't the look of a man at his girlfriend's party. He was wearing it fully now, up close, and she felt it move through her like warm current, like the particular sensation of sun on skin after a long winter. "Happy birthday," he said. His voice was low and it moved through her chest the way it always did. "Brennan." She gestured at the room around them, at all of it. "This whole. You deserve it," he said, simply, completely, like it required no further explanation. She pressed her lips together. She was not going to cry at the beginning of her own party. He pulled her in, arms around her, chin at her temple, and she breathed him in and held on, and somewhere nearby she heard Danny make a soft, choked sound that almost made her laugh. "Thank you," she said into his shoulder. "I don't even have words." His arms tightened slightly. His lips pressed briefly to her temple. "Don't thank me yet," he murmured. She stilled, pulled back, looked at him. He was already looking somewhere else. Across the room, composed, steady, and she searched his profile for the thing she had just heard in his voice and couldn't find it and told herself, again, that she was imagining things. She wasn't imagining anything. The party moved the way beautiful nights move, warm and luminous, full of laughter and the specific sweetness of being surrounded by people who have known you long enough to love you well. Toasts were made. Glasses were raised. She danced with Danny and sat in a corner for 20 minutes with two of her oldest friends and felt, in those pockets of the evening, genuinely and completely present. But the frequency was still there. That low, persistent hum beneath the surface of the evening. Like a note being held just below the range of hearing. Like the last few seconds before a photograph, that specific electric stillness right before the shutter falls. She started to notice things. Camille kept glancing at Brennan. Quick, careful, the kind of glances you don't catch unless you're already watching for something. Danny's phone had been raised since Zara arrived, angled with a deliberateness that went beyond casual video. Marcus, one of Brennan's closest friends, a man she'd always found warm but reserved, was standing near the edge of the room with his wife Priya, and they were watching. Not the room, not the party, her. The music was still playing. People were still laughing. Everything looked exactly like a birthday party. Except it didn't feel like one anymore. Felt like a held breath. Zara set her champagne glass down on a nearby table. She looked across the room for Brennan. He was with Marcus, but he wasn't talking. He was looking at his phone, and then he slid it into his pocket and said something brief to Marcus, and Marcus nodded, and something passed between them that Zara felt in her sternum from 20 feet away. And then Camille appeared at her elbow. Suddenly, quietly, with the energy of someone who has been waiting for a precise moment and has just been told it has arrived. "Zara." Her voice was soft, strange, full. Zara turned. "What? Camille, what is? I need you to know something." Camille's eyes were already bright, already glassy. "Whatever you're feeling right now, whatever is happening in your chest, just let it. Don't stop it. Don't manage it. Just let it happen. Camille, you're scaring me. You don't need to be scared." Her voice broke slightly on the last word. She pressed her lips together, collected herself, and reached out and squeezed Zara's hand once. Hard. "You have never in your life needed to be scared of being loved." Zara stared at her. The music shifted. Not abruptly. Gradually, the way a tide moves, the playlist easing into something slower. Something that opened space around itself the way certain songs do. The kind that make a crowded room suddenly feel intimate. The lighting shifted too. Almost imperceptibly warmer. Almost imperceptibly closer. She caught it all. She was catching everything now. The room was changing its shape. Not physically, the walls were the same, the tables, the flowers, the amber light. But the attention in the room was moving. Slowly, without announcement, the way water finds its level, every person present was orienting. Finding their position. Turning, without quite turning, toward the center. Toward her. She turned. And Brennan was moving through the crowd. He wasn't hurrying. That was the first thing she registered. That he was not rushing, not performing, not moving with the energy of a man trying to create a moment. He moved the way he always moved. With quiet, certain ease. The way a man moves when he knows exactly where he is going and is no longer in a hurry because arriving is already inevitable. The crowd moved for him without being asked. Her people, his people, all the people assembled here tonight under the pretense of a birthday, they simply parted. Stepped back. Made space. Because they knew. Every single person in that room already knew. And now there was only him, crossing the room toward her, and her standing completely still in the middle of it, and the 20 feet of floor between them closing step by deliberate step. Her hands were trembling. She didn't notice until she looked down and saw it. This small, involuntary shaking, her body already responding to something her mind was still trying to form into a sentence. She looked back up. He was close now. Close enough that she could see his face fully. The steadiness of it, the certainty, and underneath all of that, barely contained, the enormous feeling that had been living behind his eyes all evening and was now finally, completely allowed to exist without a door in front of it. He loved her. She had known that. Had known it for 18 months. But this was a different register. This was love with its full volume turned up. Love with nowhere left to hide and no desire to. He stopped in front of her. The room went silent. Not gradually. All at once. As if every person present had drawn breath at exactly the same moment and was holding it, collectively, the entire room suspended in the half-second before everything changes. Brennan looked at her. And Zara, who had spent 2 years building her life around this man, who had given him the last room, who had said yes on a rooftop in April and meant it with everything she had, felt her eyes fill so completely and so suddenly that the room blurred, and she let it. She didn't reach up to stop it. She didn't press her fingers to the corners of her eyes or angle her face away. She didn't do any of the small careful things she might have done in any other moment of her life. She just stood there, in front of everyone who loved her, and let herself feel all of it. Behind her she heard Camille make a sound. Soft and undone. To her left she heard Danny. Phone raised with shaking hands. Pull a breath that was more than halfway to a sob. The room held, and held, and held. Zara, just her name, in his voice, waited with everything they had ever been to each other. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. I had a speech, he said. His voice was low and even, pitched for her. But in the complete silence of the room every word was perfectly clear to everyone present. I wrote it down. I read it so many times I could recite it backwards. I practiced it standing in my kitchen at 6 in the morning like a man who has completely lost his dignity. The corner of his mouth moved. That barely there almost smile she had loved since the first week she knew him. And standing here right now, looking at you, I don't remember a single word of it. Someone in the room exhaled softly. He didn't look away from her. What I remember, he said, is a Tuesday in October, a lobby. A woman who walked in with a camera bag on her shoulder and a shot list in her hand and didn't look up when I walked toward her. Pause, quiet, deliberate. Something happened in that moment that I didn't have a word for. Something in me just stopped. The way a compass stops when it finds north. I didn't understand it then. I didn't need to. It was already true. Zara's tears were running freely now. She wasn't trying to stop them. I remember 4 hours in a coffee shop when I had 3 meetings I didn't attend and felt no remorse about a single one. I remember learning the way your face changes right before you laugh. This thing that happens around your eyes, before the sound even comes out. His voice was still even, still controlled, but something in it was thinning at the edges the way ice thins over deep water. Still holding, but only barely. I have been watching that happen for 2 years. I will never be tired of it. She pressed her hand harder against her mouth. You have been the safest place I know, he said. And I am aware of how that sounds. A man who has built things, who has run things, who is supposed to have everything structured and managed and certain. Saying that the safest place he knows is a woman with a camera and the most specific coffee order he has ever encountered in his life. The room responded, soft laughter, warm, and then quiet again just as quickly. But it's true. You are where I exhale. You are where I stop performing. You are the only place in my life where I am exactly and completely myself and don't have to manage any part of that. He stopped. One breath. His hand moved to his jacket. And Zara understood. Her knees went uncertain beneath her and she felt Camille's hands appear at her elbow from behind, steadying, and she grabbed on without looking because she needed something to hold, and Camille had always been exactly that. You have spent your whole career, Brennan said, his voice quieter now, the words coming slower, each one placed with the care of a man who has been saving them, capturing the moment when love becomes permanent, when two people stop being two people standing near each other and become something else entirely. He looked at her, only at her. I want that moment to be ours. I want to be the one standing in your photographs from now on. I want to be in every frame for the rest of your life. He reached into his jacket, opened the box, and knelt. The room came apart, not in pieces, all at once, beautifully, completely, every held breath releasing into something that sounded like joy and felt like it too, felt like it in the chest and the throat and the backs of the eyes. She heard Danny before she saw her. A sound from her little sister that was pure and unguarded and full. The sound of someone who has been holding something wonderful in secret for weeks and has finally been given permission to feel it completely. She heard Camille against her shoulder. No version of composure remaining, not even attempting it. She heard Marcus, quiet, steady Marcus, clear his throat once and go silent. She heard Priya whisper something that sounded like I knew it, and she heard her own heartbeat, and she heard the song playing softly beneath all of it, and none of it felt like noise. All of it felt like love. But she wasn't looking at any of them. She was looking at Brennan, on one knee, in front of everyone who had ever loved either of them, holding the ring box open with both hands and looking up at her with eyes so unguarded, so completely and irreversibly open, that she felt seen in a way she had no framework for. Not just seen the way he always saw her. Seen the way you are seen when someone holds you up in front of the whole world and says, the ring was extraordinary. She registered it from a distance. She could not look away from his face. Zara Ellison, he said, you are the finest photographer I have ever seen, the worst sleeper, and the person I want next to me for every single day I have left on this earth. Something moved across his expression, warm, unhurried. The particular piece of a man who has arrived exactly where he intended. Will you marry me? She didn't think. She wasn't aware of deciding. She was only aware, suddenly, completely, with every part of herself at once, of saying yes. Before he finished the question, before the last word left his mouth. Yes, Brennan. Yes. Saying it the way you release something you have been holding for a long time without knowing you were holding it. The way you exhale after you've been underwater. The way you open a door you realize you have been standing in front of far longer than you knew. Completely, without hesitation, with the last room finally, fully open. He exhaled. That sound. That quiet, undone exhale from a man who has been carrying something enormous and has just been given permission to set it down. That sound was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard in her life. More beautiful than any photograph. More beautiful than any moment she had ever frozen in a frame. He rose. He took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger, warm metal, brilliant stone, the specific and permanent weight of something real. And for one suspended moment they both looked at it. This new thing, this changed thing, this declaration made visible in the light. Then he looked at her, and she looked at him, and the room around them was Danny crying without apology. Was Camille's hands pressed over her mouth? Was Marcus and Priya holding each other? Was every person who loved them both gathered in one golden room, celebrating the moment two people became a promise? Brennan pulled her in, both arms, completely, the way he always held her. Like she was simultaneously the most delicate and the most solid thing he had ever had the privilege of touching. She buried her face in his shoulder and breathed and cried and laughed at herself for crying and felt his arms tighten and didn't try to do anything other than be exactly where she was. Hi! he said low into her hair. Hi, she managed. You okay? She pulled back and looked at him. Face wet, eyes bright, entirely undone and entirely unashamed of it. I am so far past okay I cannot see it from here. He laughed. A real laugh, full and warm and relieved in the way only a man who has been holding a secret for 3 months can be relieved, and kissed her right there, in front of everyone, without a single thought for the audience. The room erupted. If you're still here, if this story is living in your chest right now the way I hope it is, please leave a comment and tell me the moment that got you. Tell me what you felt. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it right now. This channel is built for people who believe that love like this is real. The patient kind, the steady kind, the kind that kneels in front of everyone without flinching and says, "You, always you." Every subscribe, every like, every share keeps these stories coming. Thank you for being here. Now let's finish this. They slipped away from the celebration 15 minutes later. Not to leave, just to breathe. Just to have 60 seconds that belonged entirely to them, outside the beautiful noise of the room. A balcony off the side of the venue. The city spread below them. Charlotte glittering in the February dark in its nighttime language of light and motion. Zara held her hand up. The ring caught the light. A round stone, warm and brilliant, set in gold. She turned her hand slowly. Let the light move through it. Watched it the way she watched everything worth seeing, with full, unhurried attention. When did you pick it? She asked. 3 months ago. She looked at him. 3 months. I've known longer than that. But 3 months ago I found the right one. A quiet beat. I saw it and I thought, that's hers. That's exactly hers. He paused. I was right. She looked back at the ring. Her eyes were dry now. Not because the feeling had passed, it hadn't, and she understood it wasn't going to. Not tonight, not ever, not completely. It had simply found its level. Settled into her. Become part of the architecture of who she was and who they were and what they were going to be. I had no idea, she said. I thought I was perceptive. You are perceptive. His voice was warm. About everything that isn't yourself. You turn the camera outward. You always have. She considered that. It was true. It was the kind of true that only someone who genuinely knew you, all the way through, not just the parts you offered, could say. How long have you known? She asked softly. That you wanted this. He didn't answer immediately. She looked at him and he was looking at the city, and there was something in his profile in that moment, in the quiet steadiness of it, in the particular way he held himself when he was being completely honest, that made her chest ache with a sweetness she had no adequate language for. Since the coffee shop, he said finally. The first one. 4 hours in and you were talking about the way light changes in the mountains in the late afternoon, the specific color of it, the quality, and I was watching you talk. He stopped, exhaled slowly, and I thought, I want to listen to her talk about light for the rest of my life. Zara felt her eyes burn again. She pressed her lips together and breathed and looked at him. At this man who had walked toward her in a lobby on a Tuesday in October and decided, quietly, without announcing it, without asking anything in return, that she was worth being patient for. You never said anything, she said. I didn't want to scare you. He looked at her. You were worth waiting for, however long it took. She held that, let it move through her completely all the way down. She thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago. Guarded at the center, the last room locked, certain that the safest version of love was the kind you kept measured and managed and never fully released. She thought about every door she had quietly put up between herself and this man. And she thought about the way he had simply remained. On the other side of every single one. Patient and present and certain, not pushing, not demanding, just there. Until she ran out of doors. Until the last room remembered it was allowed to open. She reached up and straightened his collar. A small, quiet gesture, the kind that belongs to people who have built something together, something daily and specific and entirely their own. He caught her hand and held it there, against his chest. His heartbeat, steady, even, real. What do we do now? She asked. Tonight, he considered. We go back inside. We dance until Danny makes it weird. We let Camille give the speech she has clearly been writing in her head for 6 months. We eat the cake from that bakery in Noda you've been talking about since August. Zara turned to him. You remembered that. I remember everything about you, he said simply. I always have. She looked at him for a long moment. At all of him. The steadiness. The warmth. The particular quality of his attention that had never once in 2 years felt like anything other than a gift. And after tonight? She asked quietly. After tonight, he said. We plan the rest of our lives. The city glittered below them. The warm light from the room behind the glass fell across his face. Inside, she could hear the celebration, laughter, music, Danny's voice rising above everything else the way it always did. And it sounded like joy, like the specific sound of people who are happy because someone they love is happy. She looked at the ring one more time. Then she looked at him. And she took his hand. And they went back inside. There is a kind of love that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive in a single dramatic moment or declare itself in grand gestures. It grows in the margins of ordinary life, in the text sent at midnight for no reason, in the coffee made without asking, in the man who remembers the name of a bakery you mentioned once in August because he remembers everything about you, because paying attention to you is not an effort for him. It is simply what he does. It is simply who he is with you. It grows in the texture of Sunday mornings and long silences and the specific weight of being fully known, the joyful parts and the guarded parts, the extraordinary and the unfinished and the still becoming, and being chosen anyway, not in spite of all of it, because of it, every single piece of it. Zara Ellison had spent her whole career on the other side of the lens. She had spent years capturing the exact second when love becomes undeniable. When two people stop standing near each other and become something permanent, something that cannot be undone or unnamed. She knew what that moment looked like from the outside. She had made it her life's work to find it, to see it, to freeze it in time so it could be returned to again and again and again. She had never once imagined being the subject. She had never imagined that someone was on the other side, watching her, deciding she was the image worth keeping. But Brennan Cole had known since a coffee shop on a Tuesday, since the way she talked about light in the mountains, since she walked into a lobby with a camera bag and a shot list and didn't look up. He had known. And on a February night, in a room full of amber light and ranunculus and garden roses and every person who had ever loved either of them, he made sure she knew too. If this story gave you something tonight, if it made your chest warm or your eyes full or your heart just a little more open than it was when you pressed play, please share it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that this kind of love is real, that it is patient, that it finds you in ordinary lobbies on ordinary Tuesdays and decides, without telling you, that you are worth every single day of the wait. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Like this video. Drop a comment and tell me which moment broke you open, because I read every single one. This channel is built on stories like this one. And you are the reason it exists. Until next time.